Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Iran International Insight. I'm Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Director of the Iran Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies think tank in Washington, D.C. Today we're honored to have two guests who have seen the highs and the lows, the depth and the breadth of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, and we couldn't be more thrilled to be hosting them at this very timely point in U.S.-Iran relations. We have to my immediate right the one and only Joel Rayburn, Senior Fellow now at the Hudson Institute, and again, the one and only to his right, the one and only Rob Satloff, President of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, a good neighbor and a friend. Pleasure to be with you both, gentlemen. Let's begin with what is right at the tip of the press these days, a potential U.S. strike on Iran. Joel, you've served in Trump 1.0 administration with distinction, looking at the breadth and depth of the regional file, covering some of Iran's proxies, the Syria issue, and more. Is a strike likely? I mean, the president has hyped it up right now. Certainly, there's a potential for another red line moment. Is a strike likely on the Islamic Republic of Iran, and where could that take us, given the fact that the regime has said they would respond with missiles against Israel, against American bases, and against naval assets?
Well, Behnam, I think, and thank you for the question, but I think in these kind of situations, when there's a dynamic situation, it's changing hour by hour, there's an unpredictable situation inside Iran, it's hard to know exactly what's happening on the ground. It's very difficult to predict what tactical decisions the United States or any other allies are going to take. I do think what we have seen, though, is that U.S. policy has turned quite decisively to a point where the administration is determined to, at a minimum, neutralize the Iranian regime as a threat in the region. Now, what that means in this specific situation is dynamic. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, if I had to put money on it or look to Polymarket, I would think that President Trump is going to be inclined to do something rather than nothing. But what that something is, I can't predict. There are a lot of different options that he would have. Some of them would be kinetic, as we would say, or he could also deploy Connecticut. We're not sure. They could be kinetic. They could be non-kinetic. I don't know. I think, though, zooming back from the situation, I think we've seen an arc of policy direction dating back to October 7th, 2023, into the beginning of the Trump administration, down to today, where the Iranian regime, as it's constituted and as it behaves outside its borders, is no longer tolerated. It's no longer tolerable, and it's not sustainable either. We can get into that a little bit later. The prospects for this Iranian regime, aside from the current crisis, and it certainly is a crisis.
And let me push you there a little bit more, because you are correct. The regime kind of has been boxed in, under pressure at home, under pressure abroad. Some have said kind of back to its natural borders in terms of the regime's predation. Given that the regime is weak, given that it now faces 3 weeks of protests from the street against the state, isn't this a moment of opportunity to be able to do a little bit more than just kind of defang? And if you were in the commander's seat, what might you recommend?
Yeah, I think actually, I think what we do see, military action, military posture aside, not just U.S. military posture, but Israeli military posture, putting that aside, I think we do see, I think we can impute to the president and to the administration a decision to return to the maximum pressure policy, a maximum pressure campaign of really crunching the Iranian regime's revenues, crunching its ability to generate the resources that it needs to project power beyond its borders, to maintain a network of militant proxies, but also eventually to be able to resource the internal machinery of control, the apparatus of control. I think that's in the offing. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not necessarily going to happen quickly. But I do think I think we're seeing a policy change in that regard, or a strategy change, let's say. return to really choking the Iranian regime economically, financially, politically, isolating it, and so on. And that's even aside from what the president may decide or not decide to do militarily.
Rob, I want to touch on the C word that Joel mentioned, which is campaign, because there's been a spectacular use of military force by President Trump in 2025 against the regime's nuclear program, and in early 2026 to decapitate the Maduro regime in Venezuela. But those really seemed like one-offs. You've seen the highs and lows of military force be used across administrations in the Middle East, in the heart of the Arab world. Now pivoting to Iran, might this be the beginning of a different kind of campaign, potentially low-intensity air campaign, or is this going to be, if it is kinetic, something one-off that kind of, per Machiavelli, satisfies and stupefies?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for including me in this panel. I'm delighted to be with you, Joel. It's clearly a very fluid moment. The administration has evolved quite a bit in its facility with the use of force, with its willingness to use force, with its imagination on the use of force. This is very different from where we were in Trump 1, which was much more shy in its use of force and almost immediately after it did a certain act, it shut it down and did not want to proceed much further. Right now, there's a fluidity also on the political side of the use of force, where we're seeing some key actors of the administration suggest that perhaps the president has been too quick to use force, too frequent in his use of force, and there may be and sort of an irony, much like in the Obama era, when the Libya campaign came just days before the Syrian uprising started, and the use of force against Libya turned out to be a bit of a bar to again using force so quickly against Syria. The poor Syrians paid for their bad timing by coming only a few weeks after what happened in Libya. So too, perhaps we're seeing a similar dynamic where the use of force against Maduro may have exhausted some of the desire by certain people in the administration to use force. That said, the president has been quite clear about his own credibility in terms of bringing an end to the vicious, violent execution of Iranian civilians. That is the first bar that he has to meet. Whether that can be done through means other than the use of force, so be it. But if it requires the use of force, it's difficult to imagine that the president is going to go much further in time if the killings continue. Now, I know I saw some recent tweet suggesting that perhaps the killings have let up. I think we need a lot more evidence to see that, and I suspect, in fact, that there is considerable violent suppression of peaceful protests going on as we are talking at the moment. Then there are other objectives, and here the question really concerns what are the appropriate objectives that the administration chooses. One bar, as I just said, is just the use of force against civilians. But then there are other objectives it may seek, which have to do with regime behavior change and regime leadership change, and even more consequential, total change of the regime. I don't know whether a decision has been made on any of that yet. The president has not spoken about that. So far, he's limited his comments to the heinous use of force against protesters. I know what I would like to see. I would like to see clear American action that helps at the very least to level the playing field for unarmed protesters to air their grievances against an oppressive regime. This will be their revolution if it happens, not ours, not the expatriate communities. It will be theirs. It will not be something that we trigger or that we engineer, but to help level the playing field for them to be able to assert their own wishes and desires for the future. That's a fully legitimate role that the United States can be playing.
And you mentioned all the different variables and all the options at play. You've seen many other American presidents deal with pro-democracy protests in the Middle East. How much now in 2026, not just with the Trump administration, but in terms of U.S. priorities in a fast-changing world, should that continue to be, if at all?
I doubt very much that this president is animated by the democratic spirit. I think far more likely he is animated on the one hand by outrage at the visuals of unarmed people being gunned down in the streets of a great nation like Iran, on the one hand, and on the other hand, that this country has been a source of affront and threat to the United States and its allies as long as one can remember. So it's not so much for this president a Jimmy Carter-like desire for democracy and human rights. It is, I think, a more visceral reaction to the killings and a recognition that this regime, which has been just so anathema to American interests, may in fact be on its last legs.
And some of that imagery I want to unpack today. You know, Iran International, those who have been following its both English and Persian language reporting, has reported that at a minimum, based on many local sources, there have been at least 12,000 Iranian civilians reported killed, most if not all under the cover of an internet blackout. Now, we've seen this movie before. We've all lived through November 2019, where it wasn't, per the Washington Post, that democracy was dying in the darkness. It was Iranians that were dying in the darkness. The regime then shut off the internet, and a reported 1,500 people were killed within a span of 3 to 6 days. So we've been here before. But Joel, I want to pivot to you on this front because you've covered the region extensively, Iraq extensively. You've come up against on the battlefield, militarily, politically even, Shia militias, their political fronts, their political affiliates in the Iraqi context. There was another report by Iran International about the regime bringing in the Hashd-e-Shaabi, bringing in the Shia militias to support the apparatus of repression. We have people in the audience now who were on the street in Iran in 2009. There's always been that allegation that since 2009, you have heard Arabic among some of the security forces. In 2019, after the floods took part of south and central Iran, and there was some protest there. Both the Afghan militias and some of the Iraqi Shia militias were there for flood relief, but the local populations had other concerns. Now that we're seeing this reporting again, how credible might that be to you, and how plausible might that be that in an end-of-days scenario, where if the security forces are going to flip, that Khamenei's Foreign Legion is what bails out the Islamic Republic?
Yeah, well, I think the reports are plausible. I think especially given the Quds Force relationship with the Iraqi militant groups and also Lebanese Hezbollah, there's always a contingent of those guys that's resident in Iran, training, or they have access to Iran. They can rotate in there. So there's always some number, I think, yes, that could be deployed. However, I think the deployment would be on a scale that is small compared to the broad nationwide crackdown. So I don't think it's decisive. And no, I don't think the Foreign Legion, Khamenei's Foreign Legion, is strong enough to be able to operate in Iran in a way that would prop up his regime. That's the IRGC itself. That's the internal security forces. That's the Basij, or the part of the Basij that actually operates and is deployed. So I don't think it's Arab militants that are going to. It's entirely plausible that there are Iraqi militants on the street, on motorcycles, being, foot patrols, cannon fodder, et cetera, and shooting, especially because they don't have any compunction. I think Arab militants, Iraqi militants, Lebanese militants don't have any compunction about shooting Persians or fellow Iranians. They're not fellow Iranians to them. They're a foreign element. So I think they could be relied upon to crack down in that way. In the same way that some foreign elements went into Syria and the Assad regime could use them. There was no local ties or anything for them that would prevent them from shooting on fellow Syrians. So yeah, I think it's probably small. Also, the Iraqis. I love my Iraqi friends. I love Iraq, but Iraqis, culturally speaking, are, especially when we're talking about military matters, are very good at declaring that they're going to deploy this or that place in, strength of 100,000 or something. You can remove 2 zeros, and then maybe they'll show up and maybe they won't. And that's probably something that's happening here. When the Quds Force calls, not many of the Arab militias, I think, would really come.
So that was more bluster than perhaps even some of these videos we're seeing now. Abu
For sure.
Azrael.
When the Assad regime, is my mic off? When the Assad regime was in its final days, there was a lot of talk about 20,000, 40,000 Hashid members were going to roll in from Iraq, and none of them showed up because they all could see the writing on the wall, and they weren't really interested in trying to go and save a regime that was already, mostly dead.
Well, speaking of Syria, there is a real Syrian example here with what we may be living through, which is a Trumpian version of R2P. For those of you who know R2P, responsibility to protect, in the Trump administration 1.0, not once but twice, there was the punishment for the violation of a norm in Syria. It wasn't a U.S. direct involvement in the Syrian civil war, but I believe, and gentlemen, correct me on the date, April 2018 and April 2019, there was just, I think, standoff weaponry.
2017 and 2018.
2017 and 2018 for CW use, right?
Yes.
So there is clear proof that Trump can get involved militarily in a conflict, punish violation of a norm that he believes is apparent. Rob, you mentioned the particularly vivid nature of some of these things, and then back away and the context not devolve towards regime change and the battlefield not meaningfully change. Do you think that's a worthwhile model to explore here? And do you think President Trump might be channeling that?
Look, far be it for me to try to understand to try to channel President Trump. It is a very different sort of scenario in the sense that the president has identified a stop to the killing as the objective that he's trying to achieve, for which he said help is on the way. This is somewhat different than partial punishment and partial deterrence on the use of chemical weapons. Chemical weapons remained in the hands of the Syrians even after Trump's action. It was really a price that they paid for the use of chemical weapons. I think that here we have a much more visible, tangible test. Will the president's actions bring an end to the carnage? Will anybody's external actions bring an end to the carnage? That's the key right now. And then what we don't know, we went into this earlier, is whether the administration has deeper objectives, more strategic objectives about the nature, the content, the behavior of the regime that they will try to use this moment to advance. That's a big question mark. The first one is clear. The president said so. So I see the similarity, but I think we have its own case right now and its own test of whether we're going to rise to the challenge.
So similar, but definitely not the same. Gotcha. Anything to add on the Syrian front?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, Syria, there are some lessons to be drawn there, and I was the staff officer for both of those retaliatory strikes against the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons in April 2017, April 2018. And there, the president acted because it was a matter of weapons of mass destruction, their use, their potential proliferation, and if you had an adversary regime that was able to use weapons of mass destruction, obviously proliferate them, continue to maintain them, proliferate them, use them after they had already pledged under a UN Security Council resolution to end that program, then that posed a threat to the United States and our allies in terms of giving encouragement to other regimes around the world that might think, well, okay, that's what we can do. We can do what Assad just did. So it was that intersection of the local situation plus weapons of mass destruction. I think that's also the thing. It's the same intersection that we saw in June of last year, where the president acted again when the issue was one of weapons of mass destruction program, along with a ballistic missile program and arsenal that the Iranians were using as a threat to our regional allies, to our presence in the region, but also beyond that region, so that that's the same missile program that was being used by the Russians in Ukraine. So it was having a destabilizing impact in Ukraine. So there was an intersection of more than one strategic interest there, and weapons of mass destruction, ballistic missiles. That was the thing that tipped it. Do we have that in this case? I think yes, we still do, because the ballistic missile program, also whether the Iranian regime is attempting to reconstitute elements of its nuclear program, or to recover parts of its nuclear program that were damaged in the June war, that's an open question. So yeah, that potential intersection is still there, and still could lead the president to act on that same calculus. I'll give you one last analogy. In October 2019, when President Erdogan had the Turkish military and their supported Syrian military forces do an incursion into northeast Syria, President Trump again saw a problem for U.S. strategic interests, because that was very disruptive to the counterterrorism campaign that the global coalition had going on in northern Syria and Iraq at that time. But he didn't use military means. He didn't use kinetic means to put a stop to that Turkish incursion and to the disruption to the counterterrorism campaign. He used economic means. He immediately sanctioned the Turkish government and had very, very severe sanctions on the Turkish economy that I think would have caused the collapse of the Turkish economy, or certainly it would have caused the financial collapse of the Turkish government, and that put a stop to the military, to the Turkish military campaign. So you could see he has different. I think he has seen from his own experience that he has different tools in the kit bag.
Let me press you on this last one and then pivot south a little bit, because you guys have covered and seen the region very differently for quite a long time. Well, what about some of those other means? Some of those other means might be more easily deployable if there weren't this many protesters getting killed in the street. But there's something acute and urgent about 5, 6, 7-day internet shutdown, 3+ weeks of protests. And if the president isn't seeing the images, but the nonetheless carnage still exists, shouldn't that ring the alarm bell about the other, perhaps more kinetic options, or perhaps more creative in the cyber front, or not just more economic sanctions? And it's open to both of you.
Well, look, just on that point, I was hoping that we could get in this direction for a moment. If it is true that the internet is shut down, it is also true that the Iranian security apparatus has its own way to talk to itself. And so coming back to my notion of leveling the playing field, let's find some way to shut down their communications so that they can't talk to themselves and orchestrate this nationwide crackdown of repression against innocent civilians, and so that innocent people can at least be on the same playing field as their oppressors. So this is one thing that we can do through electronic, cyber, and other means. We have ways of shutting down the communication system employed by the regime. This is, not dropping bombs that some people don't like to see. I don't have hesitation on this, but I can understand why some people don't like the imagery of American engagement that way in this. But this is another way that we can have a very important impact, especially right now, about what is going on the streets and the towns and the villages of Iran, shutting down the communication system that enables the regime to talk to itself.
Very, very acute. And maybe we can go south a little bit. Again, you guys have covered really the breadth and depth of the region, to the GCC, which was in the news this week, particularly a piece in the Wall Street Journal that talked about how some of the hedging from America's more traditional partners across the Persian Gulf may be playing a role, or might even play a footnote to history here in terms of getting the president to go back. And for those of you with good historical memory, 2017 was President Trump's first historic trip to the region, and really it was all full court press on max pressure, regional integration. Then 2025, his second trip to the region at the start of his second term, and the mood was very different across the GCC. The mood was, perhaps some of them had established diplomatic ties over the past 2 years. I was thinking Saudi Arabia here. There's the sanctions busting with the UAE. There was the mediation between the Omanis, the Qataris. So what role might America's more traditional partners play that some think have a pretty static, hawkish, anti-Iran view that actually now might be inducing restraint for the president rather than, come and help us out, as was the criticism during the Obama years? And that's both you gentlemen.
I don't think this is my personal,
Yeah.
my personal view. I don't think there are any major Arab countries, certainly frontline countries in the Gulf region, that believe that the Iranian regime is a regime that they can live with indefinitely. So I don't believe, and in my experience as a diplomat and military officer, I have not seen a real restraint from the Arab capitals to either U.S. or Israeli pressure or action, pressure against or action against the Iranian regime. I think all of those capitals think they'd be better off without the regime, or certainly without a regime in Tehran that has the foreign policy and the behavior that the current regime has. And I don't think they can just, they think they can just live with a Khamenei, an Iranian regime with a Khamenei foreign policy indefinitely.
Rob?
So I agree with that. I mean, it's important to remember that this Iranian regime has attacked in the last number of years not just Israel, but attacked Saudi Arabia, attacked the United Arab Emirates. I mean, they're an equal opportunity aggressor. That said, I also think that all of these regimes all the Arab partners of America in this region, none of them are going to be out in front urging the United States to be, to use military force against Iran. They're all going to worry that blowback will come in their direction, that they all have vulnerabilities, that Dubai is only X kilometers from a missile length, that Qatar is a vulnerable country, that all the Saudi construction is vulnerable. They will all be fearful that they will pay a certain price, and that what America might do will only scratch the surface, maybe address today's problem, but not fundamentally alter the situation in Iran. And so therefore they'll wake up the next day and still be dealing with this very nasty regime. If they were all convinced that America was committed to a fundamental change in Iran, they would be much more open about their preferences here. But because we are, I think quite legitimately at the moment, focused on stopping the killing and what is necessary to do that, they all have to assume that they're going to wake up one day and this regime may still be there, even if it's on its final legs, even if it is its days are numbered. And so you're going to see this restraint, quietness, letting other people take the front, the lead from these Arab regimes.
I want to get to another country that begins with I in a second that plays a pivotal role in this region, but let's just keep going down.
Indonesia?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
India, Indonesia, we could unpack that momentarily, but let's go to some of the other partners of the Islamic Republic. Again, Joel, you covering Syria for a while. You talked about the collapse of the Assad regime. Just recently, we had President Trump take out Tehran's sole state partner in South America, the Maduro regime of Venezuela. So they're losing partners left and right. But you guys have seen the encroachment over the years of two other major states who have significant strategic difference and strategic enmity and animosity with us here in the United States, and that's Russia and China. What could you tell us about how Russia and China see the fast-moving situation with the potential for more military force against a country which I think we can safe to say, despite the number of times they've sold Iran down the river, is still a junior partner in this newfound axis of aggressors, axis of authoritarians? What might they be seeing and what might they be calculating?
Such a series of setbacks for what was, let's say, a year and a half ago, I think the rest of the world thought was a pretty potent strategic coalition of China, Russia, the Iranian regime, Syria, Assad's Syria, Maduro's Venezuela, Lebanese Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and so on. North Korea hanging out over there as well. I mean, a series of real strategic setbacks for them. The Iranian regime is the hinge of that tripartite side of the Asian side of that strategic coalition. I mean, it verges on. I think you could define it as an alliance, really. By providing, it's one of the main energy providers, not the main foreign energy provider to China. It's a missile supply. It's a military hardware supplier to Russia, including obviously, as we mentioned before, to the war in Ukraine. So it's a junior partner in that alliance, but it's an essential one. So the loss, I think we have to say the near collapse or on the verge of collapse of the Iranian regime. It's a strategic setback. If they were to disappear, if that regime were to change, or to be forced to radically alter its behavior, to flip to another side, flip out of that alliance, it would be a major setback for Russia and China, and one that would reverberate for quite a long time, I think.
I agree with this. I will add, I doubt very much that Russia or China is going to do anything significant to try to save a drowning Islamic Republic of Iran. I mean, they face their own challenges. One of the Putin will have respect if you can handle your own problems, but he's not going to be coming to try to save a drowning Islamic Republic. Sadly, the Islamic Republic is applying Tiananmen Putin-esque strategies against its own people. So in that regard, China and Russia are already having their fingerprints over what we're seeing in Iran. But in any further practical sense, I doubt very much we're going to see much assistance from Moscow and Beijing to the Islamic Republic.
Yeah, there's not much they can do. I think that would be. I'm sure they're doing things like providing intelligence. They may be providing some financing and so on, and some political support where they can. But that's about as far as they'll be able to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to come to the audience in just a second. I'm going to ask them one more question, so please prepare your questions. We'll try to make sure that this is as interactive and engaging as possible. So there will be a mic circulating. I'm going to ask the panel my final question, and then hopefully we'll pivot over to you guys to close out the hour. And that final question is the other I country in the region, because I got to be honest with you, if anybody else might benefit from the script being flipped on the Ayatollahs besides the Iranian people, besides the American people, it almost certainly is going to be the Israelis. Israel has been surrounded, as you gentlemen know better than I, by this multi-front threat from the axis of resistance, this constellation of created and co-opted terror and proxy groups. And then also there's been direct conflict. I don't know a lot of, or any really, instances in the Cold War of a non-nuclear power firing ballistic missiles that can carry a nuclear warhead at the territory of a state multiple times that has nuclear weapons without first itself having nuclear weapons. So take what we all know about deterrence and risk tolerance and escalation and throw it out the window, because we've all sat here having lived through April 2024, October 2024, and obviously June 2025, and that comes on the back end of October 7, 2023. So if this strategic context really is allowing us to see the benefits of change, what might explain Israeli national security thinking here, both perhaps domestically, perhaps on the military hardware front, the missile math between these guys, interceptors versus ballistic missiles, and everything else that might be at play here, whether it's standing with the Iranian people, which you see much more vigorous political support for from Jerusalem over the past few years, to anything else that might be at play, guiding, pushing, dampening, driving Jerusalem's national security decision-making here.
Yeah, I think the Iranian regime began to believe its own propaganda circa 2023. They've had a rude awakening. They spent decades mistaking restraint for weakness. They began to miscalculate their own power and the power of their proxy network vis-a-vis both Israel and the United States. And now they've had a lesson in cold, hard military science. And it's probably not over yet. I think they found out the emptiness of their proxy, what they thought was a proxy deterrent against Israel. Now they have no viable proxy deterrent at all. I doubt that Rocky Hashid is going to suicidally come out from its soft target bases and engage in a war against Israel. The Houthis are too far away. Hamas no longer exists as a strategic threat. Hezbollah really no longer exists as a strategic threat. So it's only the Iranian ballistic missile arsenal. We're not sure how much of that remains. I don't think much of it would remain at all if they began using it. So we're talking about a middle power that is bereft of an actual deterrent against much stronger powers. If there is another military confrontation, we know where that's going to go. The outcome is predetermined, and it would be suicidal for the Iranian regime. If you are Israel, of course, that is a perfect place to be in right now. And I think probably if you're the Israeli strategic thinkers, it's probably an unmissable opportunity to neutralize the Iranian regime as a threat to Israel and others in the region permanently. Whether it will play out that way in the immediate term, I don't know yet. We don't know. But it's certainly possible.
So it's abundantly clear that should the Islamic Republic fall, this would be an enormous strategic gain for Israel, for all peace-loving countries in the world. I think the Israelis have made at least the tactical decision that since Donald Trump has been out front, that Donald Trump has drawn a line in the sand. Let Donald Trump be the key actor right now. There's no comparative advantage for Israel to be out in front in any military fashion. Let the United States play this role. The president seems to have embraced it. Maybe he has second thoughts, but it's his word that's on the line. I doubt that we're going to see the Israelis take assertive action on their own against Iran. If the Iranians, make the mistake of, for some reason, retaliating against Israel or Israeli assets or Jewish assets around the world, soft targets in response to some action that America or someone else takes against them, there will be a very, very high price to pay. The gates are open, the bars are down, and the Israelis will react accordingly. But for now, it seems as though the Israelis are playing it quietly, letting the United States take the lead, and as it is focused on the responding to this violent repression.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to turn it over to you now. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand. There should be a mic coming around. And once you do get that mic, or if there is no mic, please, there is a mic, okay, great. And then please say your name and your affiliation. So right here in the front, right up here, just all the way in the front, there we go. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rania Kaiser from the American Center for Levant Studies, and I have a question for both of the panelists. Should the Iranian people are able to topple their own regime, how do you see a new Iran? What is the day after in your vision? How do you suppose that Iran is going to become to the region and to us here in the United States? Thank you.
I'll just go first here. Okay. I hope this day comes. I hope this day comes yesterday. It is impossible to know what the day after will look like. I hope that it is a swift and easy, peaceful transition to a democratic Iran representing the will of the people, that restores some sanity to economic management, that brings, that takes advantage of the talents of Iran's people for the benefit of its people. I think we know from history that these moments are much more complicated, much more fraught with potential problems. Will some knight on a on a white horse try to emerge to impose order if indeed there's a decline in public order? Will the regions of Iran reassert themselves, or will Iran maintain national cohesion? There are lots of variables. We can do what we can, but this is ultimately an Iranian process, an Iranian decision. We can offer incentives to the development of that peaceful, inclusive, representative Iran that we hope to see, but this will be an evolving story that only the Iranians will be able to write.
Any other questions from the panel? In the audience? Going once? Oh, there we go. Right back there. Oh, yes, did you, go ahead, and then
Sure.
right before your question.
Well, look, the day after, in the long run, in the longer term, after the Khamenei regime collapses, is replaced, is overthrown, in the longer term, Iran is going to be much better off. The Iranian people have such resources, human capital, potential. I think it's going to be astonishing, probably in the way they will amaze the world, I think, and how they would recover from what they've been through for the last almost 50 years. In the short term, it's going to be tough. It'll be tough to stabilize the country. I think, depending on how the collapse were to come, whether there are a lot of political factions, I think, that would be competing for power. There'd be ethnic communities. Some groups would be looking for separatism and so on, and it could be quite unstable and very difficult environment. Plus, the Iranian regime is a failing state. Irrespective, even without whatever is about to happen or not happen to it, aside from the protest movement that's out in the street right now, the Iranian regime is finished. They are done. They no longer function as a state. They are not a sustainable regime. The last function that they can perform is to use violence because they have a monopoly of force against their people. But they can't actually function as a state in every other way. That means they're not a sustainable regime. They're going to collapse at some point in the not too distant future. And Khamenei himself is not going to be able to personally keep it together, even if he does survive this current political and security crisis that they're in. So there is going to be a day after this Khamenei regime, and I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. So we are going to see the Iranian people have a chance to chart their own future. It's going to be tough at the very beginning, regardless of how it happens. But in the long term, I think they're going to be I think they're going to amaze us all.
Hi, Ferial from Georgetown. There is a lot of analysis that says for Iranian regime to go away is better to come from top down. And based on the comment you just made that the Iranian regime is not in the best state that it has ever been, do you think there is any scenario that fractions within Iranian regime are going to take actions and going to separate themselves and start to cooperate with Iranian people?
I'm not sure I quite understood the question.
Do you think that there's a chance that the topple of Iranian regime would come from top to down within?
That the regime will topple from top for that,
like kind of musical chairs, factional infighting, you push him out. He is 86, probably in a bunker.
Like in Egypt.
Yes.
Kind of
Look,
scenario.
one can't rule out any possibility right now. But what we haven't yet seen, what I hope to see, what I'd love to see tomorrow morning, is deep infighting among the security establishment at the highest level of the regime. It would be terrific if we saw this IRGC general take out that IRGC general. If somebody from the Al-Quds force, took his units and went back to the barracks to protect them from somebody else, that we start seeing breaches within the security establishment. Now, maybe that maybe the absence of internet access is going to hide this from us for a while. But you can't hide this for a very long time. Do I expect this? So far, no, we haven't seen it. I hope to see it. It would be a very positive sign. Will Khamenei fly off to Moscow, Beirut, Algeria? I think highly unlikely. I think we can rule out that sort of, Bashar al-Assad scenario. But a breach within the security establishment, eminently possible.
I think you would. I don't think you would see that kind of internal fracturing with part of the regime turning a significant part of the regime turning against a significant other part of the regime, just in the context of an internal challenge, of an internal crisis, which right now is what they have. They have an internal security crisis. I think the regime can maintain enough of a unified front in the face of that challenge. But if you combine that with an external challenge, a really severe external challenge, whether that would be a military challenge or that would be suffocating economic pressure that would cause the financial collapse of the regime, then I think, yes, you could see a fragmentation of the regime. Especially if, in a military sense, if the regime were blinded, let's say, and unable to coordinate internal control, you could see a fragmenting of it. Or, as I say, if you saw collapse of its resources, so that the regime could no longer could no longer pay for the apparatus of control, then yes.
Any other question in the audience? I'm going to take moderator's prerogative and ask one if you don't have one. All right, I'll piggyback off of that question. I'll keep it short in case it sparks some interest from the audience. But what example, again, not going back to apples and oranges, but what example might Venezuela be setting off for the administration right now with respect to Iran? Good model, bad model? I have my views as an Iranian American. I don't think the people came out just for musical chairs. I think they came out for wholesale change of regime. We've seen that for the past pattern of at least a decade of protests in this country. But what might the U.S. want, need, versus settle for here?
Look, from my humble perspective is that the Venezuela model is not a model we should hope to see replicated in Iran. Venezuela was the narrow removal of an individual leader, not a substantial change in the composition of the regime. Point one. Point two, Venezuela was very much about natural resources and oil and who sells it and who refines it, etc. Iran is about the fate of a nation. It is made that by what the people of Iran are doing. Now, it is absolutely true, and I have enormous sympathy for the people of Venezuela that have been living under this horrendous dictatorship for years. But their efforts to bring about a change are not what triggered American action. American action was a purposeful decision of the Trump administration on its own to do this. In Iran, to the extent that we are about to act, or maybe by the time this airs we have acted, it's because the people of Iran are laying down their lives in the thousands for something different, for something better. So it's not about the control of the oil. It's not about one guy. It is about something more profound.
Joel, any final words on that?
Well, I think, I think, and sort of to echo what Rob said, I think if that approach were to be tried vis-a-vis Iran, that the Iranian people would exercise a veto over it. I also think, remember what I said before, the Iranian regime is not a functioning state. It has ceased to function. It can't power itself, it can't feed itself, and it can barely pay for itself. I don't think it can pay for itself for very long, certainly not if it's under external pressure. So even if there were a palace coup and nothing else to change, it would still be on its way to collapse because it has ceased to function. And the people don't have to accept it because there's absolutely no there's just very little legitimacy left.
Any last questions before we pivot? I can take one more. I know there's a lot of people interested. Yes, all the way in the back, please, with the microphone. Thank you.
Amir Ganjbakhsh. Let's suppose that you receive a call from the White House asking for your expert opinion, both of you. What do you recommend? You have 30 seconds to discuss with each other. Then say that. Do you go for a strike, military strike, or not? Thank you.
I'm glad I'm not in the Situation Room with.
I can say what I want since they're not calling. But so the first thing I would recommend is that we use our very impressive capabilities to shut down the communication system for the government. This would be a huge step, and I think we should have already done this. I don't like the notion of a strike. A strike sounds like something that you do and then you're done, and that you can then turn to whatever next international problem is on your agenda. I think it is. I would recommend that if that first act does not bring about a substantial change in Iranian behavior, then I would target very specifically the barracks and the facilities of the IRGC operating and the Basij operating in different parts of the country. I think that we have to be very careful to avoid civilians. I think the Israelis paid a price last summer when they symbolically hit the prison, but also in the process, a number of civilians were killed. But I think if we focus a number of efforts at an ongoing effort at IRGC and Basij barracks and facilities until this violence comes to a complete halt, then I think that I think that would be quite a reasonable thing for us to do.
Yeah. So if they called me, the first thing I would say is, who is this? Who is this calling? Is this really you? Second, but no. I would tell them, let's set the military issue aside. There is no reason not to be fully implementing NSPM 2, which was the president's national security policy memorandum that came in the first days of the administration, which said he wanted to restore the maximum pressure campaign, i.e. all the non-military things that you can do, that the United States and its allies can do to pressure the Iranian regime in order to change its behavior. That hasn't been fully implemented yet. It can be. I saw us do it from 2018 to 2020 to really extensive, significant effect. The Iranian regime is in an even more brittle state than it was today than it was then. They are not resilient to that kind of pressure. So I would be telling them whatever other decision the president and his cabinet make or don't make, they should issue the instructions to the government, and they should entreat our allies to pull out all the stops, hire however many new contractors you need to, apply as many intelligence resources as you need to enforce those economic sanctions, to isolate the Iranian regime politically, which is the big thing, which also has not really been done. And I think the Iranian regime wouldn't be able to survive that, frankly, once it begins to be implemented. They almost didn't survive it the first time. They were saved essentially by a U.S. election in 2020. They don't have that at their disposal this time. So that's what I would tell them. That's what I would tell them to do. And one last example. In April 2017, the president responded to Bashar al-Assad's use of chemical weapons by doing airstrikes. We did not follow that up with a maximum pressure campaign or a political campaign to try to ensure for all time that the Assad regime would be deterred from using chemical weapons. 1 year later, he used them again. It was only after the second time that the U.S. government and our allies finally said, right, that didn't work. We can't do this just by one-off military strikes that have the impact. We have to have a campaign, and we have to use all the tools at our disposal. And that led to incredibly effective sanctions and diplomatic isolation and so on under the Caesar Act and other associated authorities that I think contributed very significantly to the ultimate downfall of the Assad regime. That's what I would advise the administration to do now.
Mr. President, you satisfied? Do we have time for one more question? Yes? Go ahead. Just pass the mic that way. And then...
Thank you. This is Shima. I have a question. I think about an hour ago, President Trump said that the execution has stopped or is going to stop and killing has stopped, and everybody's spinning their head to just interpret what President Trump is trying to say. So given all the situation both of you described with the fragility in Iran, why and how President Trump getting his intel and information, and given that there were talk that Qatar, Saudi Arabia, other countries are influencing the White House. Who is it that is really influencing the White House, and who is it that President is going to listen more these days?
So you pose a very good question.
Tough question.
I saw the tweet you're referring to just before we began our conversation. I think what will impress the president, and sorry for sounding repetitive, what will impress the president are visuals that will come out. If indeed the killing has stopped, if indeed Iran International is not able to replay videos that it gets from Iranians on the streets and the towns and villages of the country, and if indeed that has ended, terrific, that's good. And perhaps the president can take some measure of satisfaction that his warnings brought that about. But if indeed we see that, oh, it's really a lull, it's just rearming, they're just putting in a new set of bullets into the revolver, and the killing continues tomorrow, the day after, etc., then that tweet will mean nothing, and the president will know it, and everyone will know it. And so it may have value at this moment, but we will know very soon whether it has any lasting value. And the president, who's clearly motivated by a sense of credibility here, will have to take the appropriate action.
We have time for one more. Yes, please. It's called graduated escalation.
Sorry.
One more.
Yeah, no, I'm still listening to you both. I hear you both recommend sort of policies which are designed.
Is that mic on? Sorry.
Can you hear me? Is that better?
Yeah.
I can. Yeah, listening to you both, I hear you suggest policies that are designed to destroy a regime. I don't hear anything that's kind of remotely constructive about what to put in its place. And is it responsible for the region? Is it responsible for the Iranian population to destroy something and have no answer about what you're going to do thereafter, the day after?
So perhaps we were in a different room, but I didn't say anything about destroying the regime. What I said is that if the president has laid down a principle that the killing of innocent civilians is a line on a mass scale that he cannot stomach, then there are things that he could do to implement that principle. Ultimately, the success or failure or collapse of this regime will be because of the actions of the Iranian people. If it is because of a certain act that we take in order to stop them from shooting their own people, well, then that is in effect an outcome of their own of the courage of the Iranian people, not an act that we're taking. This is their decision. They're the ones that came to the streets. They're the ones that are dying. It is not up to the United States to define the future of the country of Iran. It's up to the Iranian people to define it. We can offer incentives for certain paths which may be more peaceful, inclusive than others, but ultimately this is their decision.
Yeah, I also think, I mean, look, the Iranian regime, the Iranian regime is hostile to the United States. It's been essentially at war with the United States and many of our allies for many decades. Continues to lash out, and as far as I know, hasn't taken a decision to change its behavior or its national security strategy or foreign policy. Its foreign policy, its national security strategy is a threat to the United States, a threat to our allies. And I don't think the United States has to tie its hands behind its back and just absorb that kind of punishment because the Iranian regime has not planned properly for the stability of its own country. What the United States has a compelling interest in seeing is an end to the Iranian regime's hostile behavior to us and to our allies and to our vital interests. Full stop.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking, again, the one and only Rob Satloff and Joel Rayburn. Thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom with us. And again, we'll see you on the next edition of Iran International Insight. Have a good day.